are 10 days away from Christmas. Who's counting? You know exactly, I am. As much as I try not to succumb to all the pressure, I do. Presents and decorating and baking and food preparation. So as I begin these words of the sermon so aptly entitled, "What shall I do?" I invite us into a time of prayer. A breath prayer that simply goes like this. I invite you to put your feet on the ground and wiggle your toes if you can. And I ask you to move your head from side to side, maybe get those kinks out a little bit. Now rest your hands on your lap in whatever way is comfortable for you. Wiggle your fingers. And then close your eyes if comfortable. And then as you breathe in, say or think these words, God of goodness. And then as you exhale, say or think these words, guide the work of my hands and feet. God of goodness, guide the work of my hands and feet. God of goodness, guide the work of my hands and feet. And as we slowly come out of this moment of pause, that reminds us of God's goodness guiding us in our hands and feet, we settle fully into this season that is more than just presents and decorating and food preparation and baking. And that's not to minimize these tasks, and for perhaps these tasks are a part of your love language. Rather, on this Sunday of Advent, that we are fully into this season of anticipation and promise, the anticipation of something more. In some ways, Advent rushes in, even though we think it is rather expectant and calming, but not necessarily with today's reading. The Gospel of Luke introduces John the Baptist as not just a primary character in Jesus' birth story, but also a key player in his ministry. He is not the Messiah, but he paves the way for the one who will baptize with water and spirit. He does the good. He does the good that is his to do. John harshly denounces the perpetrators of economic disparities, but he also provides them with paths of redemption, for even they have good that is theirs to do as well. In this week's story, it's significant that we hear the same question asked 3 times, as this is a question we often ask ourselves. What then should I do? How many times have you asked that question this morning? What then should I do? And sometimes we may be too daunted by the enormity of the world's problems to even respond. However, we need to be reminded that small, ordinary actions add up. It makes a difference when we are kind to a person who is lonely, when we compost, when we show up to a rally, or when we go to therapy and not pass on generational trauma. We can't solve all the world's problems, but we can do something that matters. We must trust that we each have something to offer and that other parts of the community will bring what we cannot. What is yours to do? How can we inhale the goodness of God that helps guide our hands and our feet to work, no matter how small it is? For this week, I really enjoyed Kayla Craig's commentary on this text. It's in the Advent devotional guide that's out on the table. And she's one of the guest writers for the Sanctified Art Advent series, Words in the Beginning. And I want to share a vast majority of what she wrote because I think it's that good. And I know that how busy weeks get, we don't often take the time to just read. I know I don't, so I'm going to share this with you. Play along again, shall we? Headline after headline, she writes, creation groans. Our world's labor pains seem compounded and never ending. In the overwhelm of daily responsibility, in the barrage of global crises, it's easy to feel like anything we do or say is simply a drop in the ocean. Yet in this liturgical season of expectant hope, we must remember that the good news we do in the world has ripple effects beyond what we can see. We are not the world's saviors by any means, but we move toward the one who invites us into the work and who labors alongside us. Advent reminds us that Christ came into a world fraught with the very same issues of injustice and inequality that we face, and he did not turn away. Instead, he showed us a way forward, engaged action rooted in compassion. We may think, I'm just one person. What can I do? I've thought that as well. Yet, as followers of Christ, we're invited to consider a different question, one rooted in hope and action. What is mine to do? This week's scripture calls us to a profound yet simple truth. I can't do it all, but I can do something that matters. When approached by various community members, each grappling with their role in a society marked by inequality and injustice, John the Baptist gives practical advice that speaks across centuries. To the crowds, he said, share what you have. To the tax collectors, take more than your due. To the soldiers, do no harm in pursuit of personal gain. Each instruction differs, yet the core message is the same. Do the good that is yours to do. After John shares this wisdom, he shares a second part. He points toward Jesus. We labor in vain if we are only relying on our own strength. With God's help, we are able to do the work that is ours to do. John's directives resonate with the words found in Isaiah 58, where the prophet calls us to be the repairers of the breach, the restorers of streets to dwell in. This passage invites us to bring forth restoration through ordinary actions, feeding the hungry, serving the oppressed, and comforting the afflicted. It's about the cumulative power of small acts that weave together to create a fabric of communal flourishing. So when we gather for fellowship after worship for a cup of coffee, that may be the only interaction that someone may have had all day or possibly all week. When we gather to tie blankets, the stories that are shared as we tie those blankets will go to a young person who feels the warmth of conversation and compassion and the warmth of a soft fleece blanket. When families drop off their children here at Hazel Park Learning Center, they see the warm glow of lights of our tree and teachers that share treasured moments with children, learning songs and ABCs and the safety of classrooms and corridors. The cumulative power of small acts weave together to create a fabric of communal flourishing. A popular quote stems from the Hebrew Bible's admonition in Micah 6:8. Do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Do justly now. Love mercy now. Walk humbly now. You're not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. What is holding us back from taking these words to heart? Consider our unique gifts, perspectives, talents, and resources. How might these uniquely situate us to move into action in our actual everyday life? This Advent, in the quiet quiet spaces of our hearts, where God's still small voice speaks, we are called to discern what is ours to do. Frederick Buechner articulates this discernment by saying, quote, "The place God calls us to is the place where our deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet." As we look upon the light of the third Advent candle, consider what specific opportunities we have to contribute to our community. What makes us come alive? How does that meet a need? Maybe we can extend hospitality to a lonely neighbor, volunteer at our local school, or do the personal work of healing that prevents the passing on of generational wounds. We are all called to participate in God's restorative story, a plan set in motion from the creation of the stars. The work of our hands and feet takes time, but that doesn't mean our labor is in vain. Our work might seem small or insignificant, but when we look at the lineage of Christ and the history of God's people, we see lots of ordinary, flawed people giving their small and shaky yes to God. Could they have fathomed that their lives were part of an extraordinary story where heaven breaks through and alters the course of history? Labor pains of the world are real and often feel never ending. But as we journey toward the birth of Christ, we must remember the promise that new life can spring forth from pain. Each good work, no matter how small, is a thread in the fabric of God's ongoing creation, the creation story, one where love overcomes, peace prevails, and new life emerges. This Advent, remember that our efforts, though they might seem modest, are part of a larger divine tapestry. And with God's help, may our acts of love and works of justice lead to the flourishing of all people. And may you remember that you, O beloved, are uniquely situated to bring light to the world. May we find courage this season to do the good that is ours to do, because it matters. May we see the ripples of our actions expand outward, touching lives and mending the fabric of our shared humanity. Thank you, Kayla Craig, for your commentary for this week, as I know I certainly